Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. That was the sound of the Doc Owen Show going on the air. I hope we like that music. It's only 30 seconds, like a little lead-in thing, but it's just the right amount of jovialness.
Yes.
I am joined, I'll tell you in just a second about the time. I am joined in the Hilltop Studios by...
I'm a surefire.
And?
Uncle Bachi.
Uncle Labachi. I know that for our long-time listeners, for over 4 years and 18 episodes into year 5, we have been on the air at 8 p.m. Central Time in Texas, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you may notice or you may think that we're on the air the last few shows starting at 7 p.m., right? Mm-hmm. It's not true. We moved the Hilltop Studios to a bigger hill in the mountain time, so we're still on at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
There
we're in
you
the
go.
Rockies.
Is that good logic?
We're somewhere in the Rockies.
Exactly. We had to have a bigger hill
Okay.
Yeah.
to get our voice
message
out
out.
further.
Yep.
Because we're shouting from a mountaintop.
Of course, we're freezing, but
Angelo
We're,
got
we're
snow.
glad you're here. I hope you've made the time adjustment with us for the live broadcast. If not, we are just as entertaining and as informative as a podcast. Speaking of podcast, you may find a copy of it on our Facebook page, Doc Owen Show. We are also on Twitter at Doc Owen Show and numerous and sundry other social media, all as the same moniker, Doc Owen Show, DOCOWENSHOW, and it is a group effort. We also have a blog, DocOwenShow.com, which Uncle Bocce does a great job of putting his historical research information out there. I'm getting a little bit better at reading and posting and getting involved in the blog. It's just a time issue, but I'll pick up the pace. I think I'm going to take a semester off from school and get involved in the blog a little bit. And we also have free apps, APPS, for both iPhone and Android, where you can listen to the show. You can listen to it as a podcast. You may research our library of shows. It really is an amazing value for the price, which is nothing. Doc Owen Show. Just go to your particular, Play Store, I think it's called, and iTunes. Is it iTunes? No, what's the App Store on the Apple?
On Apple.
What's it called? It's not iTunes. Anyway. The Play Store.
No.
Oh, well. You figure it out. If you've got an Apple, you'll know where to go find the app. Look for the little A inside a blue cloud. and you'll be able to figure it out. We always start the show after we do those, this is where to find us routines, in a very traditional manner, and that is Miss Surefire starts us off with an inspirational quote that she has found somewhere. Uncle Bocce gives us a little tidbit of today in history, which is what he's prone to do, and then I finish that threesome out with a leadership quote of some type. So I suggest that we take it away, Miss Surefire.
And tonight's quote comes from PassItOn.com. I think I've referenced them a couple of times already.
Pass It On.
PassItOn.com. Yeah.
It's an interesting name.
Yep.
I like it.
And tonight's quote comes from a lady by the name of Margaret Fuller. She was
Fuller Brush.
She was an American author and educator.
Okay.
And her quote is, "Whatever the soul knows how to seek, it cannot fail to obtain."
Very, very good.
I like that one.
I like Margaret Fuller. Whatever the soul knows how to seek, it cannot fail to obtain. Is that right? Was that pretty close?
That's correct.
Nailed it.
Check plus.
Nailed it.
Good
That's-
job.
Yep.
Well, the best way to remember something is to repeat it.
Yeah.
Uncle Botsy,
Yes, sir.
what do you got? What happened, man?
Well, I don't have anything for today, but for
18.
tomorrow,
Oh.
I do have something very significant for tomorrow. which
Okay,
is
we'll come back tomorrow.
February. Yeah, I'll be here tomorrow night. Because it's something that goes back to our history lessons for the president.
Okay.
Okay, and you
So
probably
this is for February the 9th.
yes.
So
for
store this
tomorrow.
away. Okay.
Okay. The 1825 presidential election.
Yeah.
If you remember, John Quincy Adams, Jackson.
I don't, but that's why we have you.
Okay. It was the first election that had to be decided by the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Because no one received enough electoral votes, neither Adams or Jackson.
Okay. Yeah, now
And
it's
remember
coming back
the
to me in
little
the
bit
fight
of
and the yada
controversy
yada.
and
Right.
yeah. So I mean, there was a little scallywagging going on there, and he became Adams actually became president,
Right.
and of course Jackson was angry as all get out. But anyway,
And that decision, are you saying that decision was handed down on February the 9th?
that's correct.
1825.
25.
Cool.
Yeah, because the election was 1824, but
Yeah. Took them that long. November of 1824.
Yeah.
Took them till February of 25 to
yeah.
wrestle
I think
through
there
it.
were something like 19 different ballots in the House.
I remember us
Before-
discussing it when we went
Yeah.
through that level of the presidency.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. This the leadership quote tonight is actually an optimistic quote about achieving the extraordinary from my friends at the Optimist Club, and it's in the section called Teamwork. It's put out by I'm going to say a person, because frankly I hadn't had time to do the homework on whether H.E. Lucock, Luccock, I don't know whether it's Mr. or Ms. It's just
yeah, it's initial.
H.E.
Yep.
Lucock. Okay? No one can whistle a symphony. It takes an orchestra to play it.
That's nice.
Remember, it's about teamwork.
Yeah.
No one can whistle a symphony.
Ah,
All right? It takes an orchestra to play it.
good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Different
That's
way
why
of
we work together.
Why,
There you
that's
go.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
There you go.
You nailed
That's
it.
good.
We got I hope you enjoy the show tonight as much as we did putting it together in terms of the interview. We're going to have a fellow on by the name of Mr. Don Barnett, who has been with us before. This is like his third or fourth interview I think we've done over a course of the years. We were really glad to find him. He is a fellow with the Center for Immigration Studies, and we're going to talk about states' rights when it comes to the refugee resettlement program. And I think you'll find it quite informative and maybe even a little, I don't want to say joyful, but there are some things about it about which we should be supportive and excited. And there are some things about it that really need fixing. And that's why it is in the news. But before we go, then we'll talk about some current events. We're going to talk about the latest in the memo ping pong, since we're going back and forth on them, and probably cover some items for those of you who still think there's no such thing as a deep state, or don't understand what a deep state means, or what that's all about. We'll go into a bit of that as well. But before we go there, we're going to go into the Wayback Machine, and Uncle Botsy's going to fill us in on the latter part of a one-term president, Mr. Zachary Taylor, if I remember correctly. And take it away. So,
Okay.
You ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
You're on.
Okay, Zachary Taylor. His election was brief. He wasn't. It was a momentous time in the presidency. The big issue then was slavery in the Western territories, And I don't know if you've been following along with these different presidents. It seems like every single one of them are putting off the issue, even though it's a big issue. And we had sectional rivalries between the North and the South. And there was always trying to be a balance. Everybody wanted to balance them because they didn't want anybody to have more states than. So it's really kind of strange.
They were avoiding the
They were avoiding
the
yes.
900-pound gorilla in the
right.
room.
They didn't want
and
the
instead of doing
controversy.
away with it or getting into that hassle politically, they just decided to kick the can down the road and
Exactly.
try to balance it out.
Yeah, and Taylor.
What are these guys with the federal government or something?
I guess so. And Taylor was absent any kind of a solution. In fact, he was kind of neutral. He didn't want to make a claim one way or the other. But then within a few months, he opted for a policy with decided anti-slavery implications that his southern wing of the Whig Party, called a betrayal. Okay, so they were angry with him.
Didn't Taylor come to office as a war hero?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And he fought in quite a few wars. The most recent was the the Mexican War, Mexican-American War.
Okay.
So he was a hero.
I asked that question for a specific reason in reference
ahead.
to his decision.
Oh.
Think about
Okay. Okay.
Think about where he's coming from.
Okay.
And what's going on.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
his willingness to fight.
Now, at the tip of the iceberg was California and New Mexico.
Really?
Yes. He encouraged California and New Mexico to write their own constitution, which in their constitution, the residents of the states decided that they would not be slave states.
Okay.
That's kind of clever that he did that. So he expected both of them to bar slavery, as they did. So he urged Congress to admit California and New Mexico to statehood as soon as their constitutions arrived, and that's what happened. The federal courts could settle the boundary dispute between Texas and New Mexico. There was some dispute about that. Above all, he warned Congress it must not attempt to organize territorial governments in the area. So he didn't want the federal government getting into the territories.
Right.
Okay, at all. And he thought that would bring a dangerous sectional conflict, over the congressional prohibition of slavery. So his goal was to avert such a rancorous debate. Now, of course, Texas and New Mexico, they did have a dispute over where, remember, Texas was a big territory, went all the way up to Colorado.
Right.
And, of course, that included half of New Mexico. But anyway.
Half of present-day New Mexico.
Right. So, yeah. And there was also Indian affairs in Florida and Texas. And there was a cholera epidemic in New York and New Orleans. And he avoided ceremonial affairs of state. He had thought the presidency, and this is a good thing here, he thought that the presidency should stand above party politics.
Interesting.
Good for him. I mean, that he, would do that. Of course, his party didn't like it. Now, he did not like to be in the forefront of making decisions. So what he did was he gave great authority to his cabinet. And said, you guys make these decisions.
Right.
He delegated most patronage decisions as well, getting rid of Democrats and putting in Whigs in the different departments and all that. There was a threat of secession. The Constitution in California prohibited slavery, and they applied for free state in 1850. Every split between slave and free, equally split between, that's the way it was. We had 30, so it was 15 and 15.
Right.
North and south. That's the way, and that's what they wanted to keep. And like I said,
it was 15 and 15 with or without New Mexico
that's without New Mexico
and California.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's why there was so much tension about, can we admit the Missouri Compromise? Can we admit states as slavery or so
Okay.
it was a big issue.
Yep.
Okay. So the Southern Democrats, they responded to Taylor's position by calling for a secession convention. So they were already thinking about seceding.
Okay, what year are we in?
We're in 1850. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he died in 1850. Yeah, so it was 1850
So we're about 15 years or more
from the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. These are important facts.
They are, especially for what's
when
coming
you're thinking
up.
about a timeline, look at, in other words, the rancorous, as you put it, activities, etc., and the challenges of getting slave and non-slave balance and working together and trying to figure it all out. From what I hear you telling me, it's been going on for
Ever since Jackson was president.
which was about when?
That was the 1820s.
So
we're talking
40
about,
to 50 years.
yeah. Yep. So they just kept passing it down, just like a lot of people do now. He was a firm believer in national supremacy, and this is where he really got tough. He told a group of Southern leaders that he would hang anyone who tried to disrupt the Union by force or by conspiracy. And this was a message mostly to Texans, because he didn't want Texas to force land grabs from New Mexico or anyone else. So he was very strong about that. There were some big political luminaries: Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, John C. Calhoun, and Stewart. They contributed weighty arguments and opinions to the discussion that captivated the country from January to September of 1850. So it went on for quite a while, this back and forth.
Well, but the only thing that our young audience needs to recognize and realize, yes, there was a lot of discourse. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of exactly what we see going on today. The difference is it was not real time.
Okay.
The difference is it was not on Twitter or on Facebook or on a blog. It was not in real time. I mean, when you put out a tweet, somebody reads it and responds within a couple of minutes. As far as I'm concerned, that's real time.
Yeah.
And these guys were going down to the town square and saying it. Somebody was recording it. I mean, it took a long while for their point of view to reach an audience.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So there were some in the Congress that they were arguing for a strong fugitive slave law. That is, any slaves that would run from their captors to the north to be free, the law said that you must return that slave to its rightful owner.
You can't protect them.
Right.
Right.
And so that became a key issue in the Compromise of 1850.
Well, because if they didn't, it would have it would show a minimal cooperation between the states,
right?
And they'd be acting as if they were countries, not states.
Yep.
Okay.
So California finally became a state in 1849. Now, he died in office. His vice president was Millard Fillmore. Okay? So when Taylor died, Millard Fillmore signed the bill into law. It's the compromise, that said, fugitive slave laws and California and New Mexico can be free states. Okay? He was very much an outside strategist. Thank you. So again, he thought that the presidency should be above party politics. Sip of water.
That's what the thank you for was
If
for.
you hear a frog in my throat, it's because he's there. So again, he gave great authority to his cabinet. There was not much experience in foreign affairs, neither him nor his Secretary of State. And there were a lot of things that were going on. German liberals in Germany, revolutions in the German states, and spats with France and Portugal over various. But that was all. There was really.
They still had to sail to get over here, right?
Right.
Well, who cares?
And one of the things that they wanted to do.
What's going on over there? It takes that long to get here.
Yeah. One of the things, this is interesting, one of the things they wanted to do was to build a canal through Nicaragua.
What?
Yeah.
Who ever heard of such a thing?
I know.
It goes in Panama.
Well, that's where it ended up, but Nicaragua was the first choice. Okay?
Who wanted that? The Dems?
Well,
Had to be.
Yeah.
And nobody puts it. Only Dems would put a.
So anyway, that was settled. The problem really was with Britain. Britain did not like the idea of America, being
able
so
to go
close,
the other way.
Yeah, being so close to like Honduras, which was a British colony.
Yep.
So they
didn't want the idea of us being able to trade
that's
in the other
correct.
direction.
That's correct. So that was probably his most important foreign policy, was the deal about Nicaragua. There were a lot of issues at the time. I think I mentioned most of them. And another big issue was women's suffrage.
Yes.
Okay? It wasn't time yet, but at this time, the only people who were allowed to vote were white landowners.
Right.
Nobody else was allowed to vote.
No.
So the suffrage movement was starting to pick up.
But you're not being quite specific enough about that. Who could own land?
Only men could own land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you said the only people that could vote.
Okay, so it was kind of redundant. Yeah, redundant.
Have some more of that water. So, but for the audience, to be perfectly clear, when you say the only people that could vote were white landowners, it was far more. So why does that spring up women's suffrage? And it's because only men could own land.
Exactly.
So it really was against the. Okay.
And I don't think anywhere in the world that women had suffrage. I mean, the only place that it really occurred was here in the United States. So there was immigration, slavery, and Native American rights. He got involved in all of those.
Back up to that, what you just said. Educate me.
Sure.
Okay, so what do you mean this was the only place where women had suffrage?
Well, as far as I know, that in any other country, most of them being monarchies or dictatorship,
right,
women did not have a right to vote.
Okay.
Only propertied white males could vote.
Which that's what we knew, so we carried on the tradition.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was just that's what it was.
Well, that's the way it was.
That's
right.
Okay.
That's right. Kind of like you hear at some businesses. This is not. That's not how we do it here. Yep.
So anyway, Zachary Taylor was not remembered as a great president. Historians believe that he was too non-political in a day when politics, parties, presidential leadership demanded close ties with political operatives. So he wasn't into that kind of stuff. And that pretty much concludes it. Let me read one quote.
Okay.
One quote. Okay. This is what he said, and this was in his inaugural address, I believe. As to the Constitution and the Union, I have taken an oath to support the one, and I cannot do so without preserving the other, unless I commit perjury, which I certainly don't intend to do. We must cherish the Constitution to the last. Zachary Taylor. So he was a very strong constitutionalist.
Yep. Apparently.
Which was good.
Good.
So next week we will talk about his vice president who became president, Millard Fillmore.
You know, that is the only way that he would become president.
Probably.
The people of this country would never elect a guy named Millard. Unless he had a really clever nickname under which to run. I have no prejudice against the Fillmore family, that part of his name.
Yeah.
But
Millard? Millard?
Like, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Uncle Bocce.
You're very welcome.
Is there any way
Thank you.
people that are listening to the show could get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can. I tell you every week, guys. I'm waiting. Uncle Bocce, UNCLEBACI, at DocOwenShow.com. I'm ready to answer any of your questions or your challenges.
There you go. He's
Thank
up.
you, Uncle
He's
Bocce.
up to it. Good job, man. Who we got next week? Real quick.
Millard Fillmore.
Oh, that's right. We already talked about that.
Yeah.
Could we just skip him
We could probably.
without much effort?
Probably,
Right?
yeah.
But that's not fair. There's
No,
Fillmore's still out there.
Got to
probably
give him his
listening.
just due.
I got it. We are now going to. You're now going to hear a conversation that I had a little earlier in the week, but play like it's real time, and he's on the telephone because that's exactly what it's going to sound like. With a gentleman by the name of Don Barnett. I will give you Don's background as we go into the recording. So enjoy. We will be back. We are about to have a conversation with a young man by the name of Don Barnett. Mr. Barnett and I have chatted for a couple of times. It is always interesting. We usually head down one path and circle around and hopefully wind up in the right spot. Mr. Barnett is a fellow with the Center for Immigration Studies, so is among the better of those great workers. He puts out some really sound information, I guess is the best way of putting it. So in our quest to deliver truth to youth, Mr. Barnett is also now an official fellow of the Doc Owen Show. Mr. Barnett, how are you, sir?
Doing fine, thank you.
Good. The title of, you've got an article out, a recent one that I want to talk about specifically. And, you know, we may wander around and talk some generalities. But the title of the article that I read is, "Do States Have a Say in the Refugee Resettlement Program?" And before you dive in, I will ask you to give the audience, I want to be very specific that this is refugee resettlement, and we're not talking about the common phrase of illegal immigrants or undocumented folks, or, in other words, these are people that have been certified as refugees, and there's a difference in the definition. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Correct. It's a formal program, and it's a federal program, but it's basically run by the United Nations. It's most of them are United Nations refugees that they have shipped. They resettle in various countries, and the U.S. has many years been. Is always the leading country. In some years, it's taken 2 or 3 times as many of these refugees as has the rest of the industrialized world combined.
Right.
Now, it's a little different from I'm not saying we're taking as many refugees as Germany is, but Germany is getting an influx of illegal immigrants, basically,
right.
And some of them are getting refugee status and some are not. This is a formal program that has been a federal program since 1980.
Right. Exactly. And I had to do a little bit of looking up and not totally reliant on my memory, but that was the Carter administration.
Yes, this was passed. Yes, this was passed by Edward Kennedy and Joseph Biden.
Right.
They were the sponsors, and it was a Carter administration. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that does a little bit of a level set on the mindset in Washington at the time.
Right.
That was what I wanted to get in there. And so it's gone on. It has, as a lot of federal programs do, it has morphed and changed a bit. And it looks like there might have been a trigger recently that maybe triggered you to say, I need to write this up. And that was that lawsuit out of Tennessee. Am I reading that correctly?
Right, that's correct. It's always been, and by the way, when it started off, it was generally couple of groups, Soviet Jews from the then Soviet Union,
Okay.
and Southeast Asian refugees, many of whom fought, alongside of us during the Vietnam conflict in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And so it did change to now it's getting refugees from all over the world. The leading countries today are Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Iraq, Iran, Bhutan. I mean, literally it's from all over. Burma, Myanmar. So it's literally all over. The question has always been, well, can the feds take a refugee and move him into a state and expect the state to pick up the cost for the refugee? Because essentially the feds, the close engagement with the refugee ends very quickly, and they're eligible for welfare too, which illegals are not, which normal immigrants are not. They're eligible for all welfare.
Yeah,
so basically,
they're eligible for welfare, Medicaid. You're lumping all those into the term welfare. But
I am.
I wanted the audience to understand it's all these things rolled into one, and again, it's because they are refugees. They
have
they've got
a status. They have a status, and they have all entitlements on the same basis as a U.S. citizen. They have all entitlements to all programs. That's housing, that's food stamps, that's Medicaid, that's cash welfare on the same basis as a U.S. citizen.
Yes, sir.
But that is costing the states a lot, because states pitch in on average about a third of the Medicaid cost, and in some states there's a percentage of cash welfare that they put in. Some states have general assistance. So basically, they're being abandoned to the taxpayer, to the federal taxpayer, and to the state taxpayer. And some states have kicked back and said, you're basically telling us how we have to spend our own resources, and that's a violation of the 10th Amendment and so on, and they've gotten out. Now, what we discovered...
My home state, Texas, has been one of those.
That's right. They're one of the states that backed out, and Greg Abbott... and some states didn't know about this little fact, and I think some states did and some states did not. But basically they're saying, okay, we're out. We don't want to take any more refugees.
Right.
Then what's happening is what was previously a state and federal program has now become a 100% contractor-run program. The contractors are coming in the back door and still running the program in exactly the same way as it was run before.
Sure.
So no change.
Sure.
And people didn't realize that. Some states were saying, wait, this we asked to get out. And then now you've come back in and given the contractor full reign. And what has happened in over history is states that do get out wind up with more refugees. That's an actual fact. If we looked into the states where it happened a few years ago, they wind up with more refugees. Why? Because there's no state input whatsoever.
Yeah.
So they don't realize it, but they've lost. And the key point is that's not in the law anywhere. That's not that's not part of the law that you can let the contractor come in and work on its own.
No,
that is a regulation.
Yeah, exactly. When they sold us the law,
mm-hmm.
They
said we're going to take care of you.
Right. We're going to expect your input. And so what's happened when the states decline, then basically they abdicated their right to provide that input. And
that's exactly right.
Isn't that right? And the federal government
That's
said,
right.
Basically, hey, you guys said, so we got it. And they pay directly, they work directly. And I noticed you used the word privatization, and I don't remember whether you put it in quotes, but you certainly made it clear.
Yeah, but it's not real privatization by any means. It's not that at all.
It's government contract.
No,
right.
and yeah, it is very much so. And when the refugee bill was passed in 1980, the states were promised 3 years of direct support for refugees.
I remember that.
And they were going to pay the state portion of Medicaid, and they were going to give cash to those. Well, they completely stopped paying the state portion of Medicaid and the state portion of TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, and all that. Completely stopped that, and they knocked back other refugee assistance back from 3 years to 8 months. Well, 8 months is just not enough to get somebody going who's maybe not even literate in their own language.
I was going to say, much less ours, right?
Right. They've lived in camps. So basically, they're being abandoned to the states. The states have picked up a large portion of the cost, and some states are objecting. And Tennessee is so far the only. I know Texas sued too. Texas sued on the basis of saying, well, you didn't consult with us, which is true.
Right.
They're supposed to consult, but they don't. People are waking up in the morning and find that there's a refugee resettlement operation going on down the street in their own town. No one even told them about it.
Thank you,
they didn't
Catholic
consult
Charity.
with the schools.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't consult with the schools. They didn't consult with the health authorities. And so Texas basically said, well, on the basis of the fact that you didn't consult with us, talking to the feds, we want it back out. Well, that didn't work because they said, well, we called you like a month before we were sending them, and then the judge said, well, that counts as consultation. So as you can see, it's really, really interesting that the feds can force this program down the throats of the states. And basically have gotten away with it. Tennessee is the only one that's picked up the case as a 10th Amendment case, because specifically the feds are commandeering state resources to implement a federal program, and that has been found to be unconstitutional in the past, and I think it will be the case this time around, but we'll see.
The more I learn, and I learn an awful lot, doing the show, actually, and talking to learned people like yourself. The more I learn, the more respect I have for Tennessee. I mean, they really seem to be at the forefront of civil liberties in the United States on a lot of fronts. I mean, we hear about it all the time. And, of course, in Texas, we're rather fond of them because if it weren't for our friends in Tennessee, we probably wouldn't exist.
Well, that's true. You're right, Davy Crockett. You're exactly right. And Sam Houston.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Yes, sir. They came down here when we needed them the most, and so
that's right.
We've always been very fond of them. Not to mention the fact I was born in Memphis, so I'm kind of leaning that way as well.
That's good. But, Texas is one of the biggest recipients of refugees.
I know.
Many years it's been in the first place. It's getting the most. So that's why they started to object.
Well, but it sounds like they may have objected on grounds that they couldn't defend in a court of law. In other words, their logic was good, obviously, but it sounds like Tennessee may have found that little niche or that little knack in the law, which is fine. Texas can benefit from that. So
yeah, well, let's hope so, because if this case goes, I think it will be significant, and I think a lot of other states will follow.
Oh, sure.
Now, yes.
So, I mean, this every time I talk to you, I always one of my thoughts is, you got to be kidding me. but but I know you're not, because you provide the numbers. So over time, I mean, this has been 1980, the original law passed, and this is something for our young audience to understand. So 37 years later, right? Is my math good? 2017, 38 years later, it is still going on. It has morphed into a basic rampage by the federal government, and the states have very little input into it, and it's done directly with the folks like Catholic Charities who have...
Right, and
go ahead.
Yeah, and the United Nations. In effect, the United Nations is setting our immigration policy because the streams that are coming in now become seed communities for future larger streams. So in effect, they're setting our immigration policy, the United Nations is.
So when I read and hear about the New World Order and the inclusion of the United Nations in our decision process, you're at the forefront of that. This is
right. It is a major example of the UN having an extremely important role in the future of our country.
Because
now,
explain to me, explain to the audience. You just, I think I know. I mean, you talked about these seed locations. In other words, they'll go into a community and they will, just for an example, they'll take over an apartment complex with refugees, and then that becomes,
correct,
and get them enrolled in school and get them all of their aids and handicaps and medical, et cetera, and then because they now have this kind of smooth operation going in that area, they will expand on that area as opposed to going to another one. Is that what you mean by a seed?
Yes, that's exactly right. They will move them into communities which, in effect, yeah, and then of course, as the people themselves settle in, they bring their relatives over and friends. It becomes a huge magnet for illegal immigrants. Believe it or not, there's quite a few Somalis that are caught coming illegally over the border from Mexico. They're all heading to see their relatives or friends in Minneapolis or Auburn, Maine, or Ohio. So it becomes a magnet for others and a magnet for legal immigration as well, because they can invite their relatives and siblings and so on.
And you talk about them in terms of specific locations because you've done the research and you know. And you can almost see the traffic pattern.
Right.
You can say, okay, we got the Somalis here, here, and here. You can almost create a map of who went where from what country.
Well, yes, you can, and that's actually a statistic that's kept by the government. They'll actually, I think that it's actually down to the city. You can go. There are government reports that say, well, so many. There are. Yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, there's been a major change in refugee resettlement, which is that its numbers have been cut into less than half.
I saw that in your report. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and so far, because we're the fiscal year started in September, so we're September, October, November, December. We're quite a ways into the fiscal year. In fact, I guess we're pretty close to halfway through, a little less than halfway through. At the rate they're coming in now, they're going to be more like 25,000. So the numbers, as we've said, it's set by the president, by the executive branch, and we just have a different president now.
Well, we talked about the last time we talked. Trump had been elected, but had not done much, and so,
had not done the numbers. But his numbers are half, and he doesn't have to reach the quota now is 45,000. That's just that's a ceiling. That doesn't mean you have to reach it. He can still bring in like 10,000 if he wants, and it looks like it's going to come in less than the 45,000. So that's much less than half of what the Obama administration had imposed as he left.
And that's year one. So that's a real clear signal.
Yeah, but if we don't address these deficiencies with the program, if say a Democrat comes in 3 years from now, the program they can move the numbers back to 1 million a year.
Right.
There's just no constraints on presidential power with this program. That's one of my arguments. It just needs to be more congressional input and more parameters around. You can't just literally. Someone could say we as Carter was bringing in 200,000 a year some years. The quota can be anything. It's a presidential prerogative. Now, Congress has gotten more interested lately because of the problems associated with it, staggering dependence upon welfare, the occasional terrorist that's come in. There's no question that we've had those kinds of things, but they would say they're well vetted, and I would say that that's probably true, but we've still had some terrorists that came in as refugees or asylees. That's what happened in Maine.
It's about their friends and family.
Yeah, and their friends and family are not vetted. Exactly right.
That, to me, that's what I hear you saying.
Right.
I also hear you saying, and rightfully so, and good on you. The whole program itself needs to be basically, if not dumped, taken apart and put back together so that it functions more closely to the original intent back in 1980. Because if you read what you published, and I did, that Edward Kennedy said and what they said about the program, it really was not. It looked like it was started with pretty good intentions, and was going to be run with pretty good intentions between the states and the feds and yada yada. But as happens over time, as we're seeing with the police state that we talk about, as we're seeing over time with a lot of things, the federal government just doesn't know when to stop. They don't know when to say, okay, you're right, states, you got it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Once they
and their promises are empty. I mean, they can back away. They back away. We see that time and time again. Even this Medicaid expansion they're talking about recently. The feds are enticing states to expand it to more people by saying, well, we're going to pay for some of it, but it's not defined, and within a few years they backed out completely, and the states are left holding the whole bag.
Well, sure, it's because, and we're seeing some of it in today's current events. They're extremely difficult to hold accountable.
Right.
I mean, it's impossible. I'm going to be watching this very closely, not just from the results, but from can we hold these folks accountable? And,
exactly.
I question it. So, Mr. Barnett, doggone it, we spend 15, 20, 25 minutes together, and I always want to spend more. You're so informative. I really do appreciate your time.
Well, I'd like to talk again. That'd be great.
We will absolutely do that, and I won't. It's been about 6 months. We'll try to make it on a little shorter leash next time. And
Great.
We'll see.
Thanks a lot.
You keep up the good work. Hold on a second. Tell them exactly how to find you. And by the way, I have a question for you. I'll ask you on the air. Don't we have permission? We have a docoandshow.blog. Aren't I allowed on my blog to link to your article on
yes, absolutely.
Immigration Studies? I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Yep.
Then the audience
right,
will know
and
where
it's
to come find it. Yep.
Right, it's at CIS.org.
There you go.
They're an immigration studies. It stands for Center for Immigration Studies, and they're more conservative than some of the others. They're not wildly restrictionist. They're just trying to get the facts out.
I was just going to say they're just fact-based, and if fact today is considered conservative, then so be it. It's just fact.
So be it.
Mr. Barnett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, bud.
Right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Remember, this is as well a podcast that you can find numerous places. The reason I tell you that is because I didn't tell you to go grab pen and paper before Mr. Barnett got on, but there's tons of information out there. We do have the article. We will get it connected and posted up to docoandshow.com. And he and his Center for Immigration Studies are a wealth of solid, referenced, verifiable information. Usually, as he pointed out, it's simply government statistics. It's simply government information that they then bring down, analyze, and feed back to lawmakers to say, here's what's going on, because the lawmakers don't have the time to sort through all the data and draw the picture. So that the researcher draws the picture. I mean, that's really all that it amounts to. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I always enjoy talking to
it was good.
To Barnett. He challenges.
Very informative.
Very, very informative. Lots of information. Solid guy. Let's talk briefly about. We've got 5 or 6 minutes before we have to say.
Adios.
Sayonara for another week. But let's talk briefly about the memo, the Nunes memo, Nunes, a Republican from California, and the counter memo that came out. But the most recent event, apparently they have found links within, and this was all started by or came to the surface as a result of the memo. The really hot topic, or the most salacious topic in the entire kind of environment, are these texts between Stroke, an FBI agent, and his mistress, his girlfriend or whatever, Lisa, and she worked for the Department of Justice. I don't remember. No, she worked for GPS for the fusion thing.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but the point is, they were in it, and they were texting back and forth and yada yada yada. Well, now they have found in those texts a reference to POTUS, a reference to specifically Barack Obama wanting to know everything that was going on. Now, but we don't have any context for what that request was about. You can take your pick. You got two choices of what that reference to him wanting to know what was going on. Either one is not good, because he shouldn't be involved at all. Right? He shouldn't be asking. He's asking the FBI for insider information. He's going out and telling the public, absolutely not. Hands off. Blah 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 blah.
He guaranteed it.
Same old Yankee.
Yep.
Bull sugar that he put out all the time. Mm-hmm. Two choices. Number one, he was asking for updated, constant information on Hillary Clinton's email scandal, because they talked about that. Number two, he was asking for information on spying on Donald Trump. Those are the two activities that were in. So we don't know exactly what he's talking about. So let's not split hairs and say, oh, he was talking about either choice is bad. Mm-hmm. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no point. Who cares which one the reference was to? Either are bad, and I don't know against the law. I'm not a lawyer. But certainly outside the realm of good sense, common ethics, integrity, and all those things we expect of a president. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I try not to get too involved in all of the details, because it's going to take a long time and there's going to be a lot of it go past. Mm-hmm. And I will be absolutely flabbergasted if anybody goes to prison.
Exactly.
I'll be like, holy camoli. Mm-hmm. We've actually stop the press, which it probably will.
Yep.
It'll also cut the mainstream media off for sure. Yep. But, I mean, it's just, I'm sorry to be so jaded and so, have a lack of faith in the system. But I've been watching this thing for 45 or 50 years. That brings me to another point that came up that actually Uncle Bocce brought up. And I've been saying this since I've been on the air, and it's one of the reasons that we are on the air, is I've been following all of this nonsense that we see going on in the federal government, et cetera, since the Vietnam War, since the mid-'60s, the early to mid-'60s. It was at that point in my life, and I was the age of our target audience, in my mid-20s, that I didn't think, but I knew. I came to the realization that what they were feeding us was bull sugar. And it wasn't as bad then as it is now. Mm-hmm. And that was how long ago? 50 years ago? Mm-hmm. Took 50 years for the Civil War to come about.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, but that's my concern. That's a serious
good
concern.
Logic.
It's been a serious. I mean, that's how long it takes for these things to bubble to the surface, where John Q. Public, that doesn't take to the radio to get it out of his system, grabs a gun and just blows up.
Just snaps,
just snaps, and it appears for no particular reason. No particular reason, my ass. We for the last 2 generations we've been feeding people garbage.
Yep.
What do they expect? And that, my friends, is the definition of the deep state. When somebody tells you that the deep state does not exist, go back to 1960, when President Dwight David Eisenhower was leaving office and told you about the vast military-industrial complex. It is known today as the deep state. Rut-row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.